Welcome to the Hobby Jogger Podcast, where elite athletes and ham and eggers lace up their stories. We explore the common ground that running creates, from the world-class runner to the hobbyist hitting the pavement, trail, or treadmill. Expect a blend of inspiration, laughter, and the shared joy that makes every step count. Join us on this journey where every run is a story worth sharing.
It is a hockey night in Pittsburgh. That line is a famous line that was uttered many times before many Penguin games in Pittsburgh, PA. Today marks the passing of Mike Lange, one of my all-time heroes in sports. He called games for the Penguins for over 40 years, multiple generations. And I think it's very fitting opening for today's Hobby Jogger, as our guest today is Matt Trappe, and he is a brand marketer, creative director, and founder of, I should have asked how to say this before, Auteur Sportif. Did I say that correctly, Matt?
Yeah. I've got to correct you on my name too. It's Trappe.
I was going to ask
the
that
E.
too.
It's totally fair. It happens like 90% of the time.
I get Cassie a lot, so I understand. Mr. Matt Trappe, thank you so much for joining Hobby Jogger today.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it. Excited to talk to you.
Yep, we have our co-host, Mr. Rob Myers, on as well. Rob, how are you?
Doing well. Yeah, it's a sad day for hockey fans.
It is. That, Mike Lange had a lot of great moments in Pittsburgh sports, calling hockey games. I'm lifelong Penguins fan, so very sad day. See how many of those isms I can sneak into today's show.
There you go.
Yeah. So, Matt, how have you been? How's everything going?
I'm doing well. Getting the year kind of kicked off here, starting to feel some momentum, and excited for everything to come this year. I think there's so much momentum in the running world, and especially trail running. And I'm excited to get outside when the weather warms up and really feel that.
Yeah, I've been stuck indoors like an inside cat now for the last 2 weeks. You used to live here in Cleveland area, so you understand the weather.
I did, and I do.
Yeah, it's. I think it's been a solid 4 weeks of snow outside and cold. So haven't made it outside much.
Has the sun been out though? That's kind of like the key, isn't it?
No.
Yeah. That's the tough part.
We went a solid 10-day stretch without seeing the sun.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's Cleveland.
Yep, that's Cleveland. I'm in Colorado now. We see the sun a lot. So even when it's cold, it doesn't feel too bad. I really enjoy that after spending, I don't know, all the way up to my early 20s in Cleveland, in the Ohio area.
Yeah, you guys get the bluebird days out there. And
we do, yeah.
Get the blackbird days, I guess. I don't know what else you would call
I don't know what they are. Yeah.
They're not good.
Yeah. So yeah, good to connect with some guys from the area, from what I still call home, where my brother lives, where my parents live, where my wife's family is as well.
Coming up here, were you involved at all with the running community before?
No, not at all. I moved out of Ohio and out of the Cleveland area in 2005. And no, I wouldn't have even characterized myself as a runner then. I was always a soccer player growing up, but like sort of post college, like trying to figure out athletically, like what even was I anymore. And yeah, that was kind of when I found running, but it was probably more when I lived in Chicago that I really started running a lot more. Just like a stage in life kind of thing, more than like the place I was living at the time.
Yeah, I know what you mean with that. Like, that's kind of former soccer player. We often talk about that on the show, of it being a good build-up sport to running, especially the ultra trail world. Takes quite an athlete to perform at high levels there. But yeah, I know what you mean. You then leave that world and come into, got to have something to do and a hobby. And so
yeah,
it leads well into the running world, I feel like.
Take your props, Casey, because you're 2-7, I think, now.
Jim kind of counts because Jim played at a pretty high level when he was young.
Oh, okay. 2.5 and 7.
Matt, so we have a running theory on this show of soccer players leading into becoming very good trail runners. Grayson Murphy was on last week.
Yep.
He played soccer in college. Jim stomped on my theory and crushed it, but he also did play soccer in his youth.
Oh, Walmsley. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Yeah. I've got a couple more for you then. Do you guys know Dave Mackey?
Gonna look it up now.
Oh, Dave Mackey's a legend. He's a former Ultra Runner of the Year. He lives in Boulder here. And Dave Mackey was a great soccer player. Scott Jaime as well was another very successful ultra runner that had a great soccer career, played collegiately. So yeah, check those guys out. Shout to Mackey and Jaime.
Sweet. 2 more to the list, Rob.
Oh yeah, those are good ones for you. Those are good ones.
Starting to lean in your favor, Casey. We'll see what happens.
I don't know if we're leaning in my favor yet, but
starting to.
Yeah, we've caught up a bit. Which is good. I was hurting pretty bad there, so thanks for that, Matt. I needed that.
Yeah, for sure.
So you mentioned that we have big things ahead of us in the running calendar this year, specifically trail running. I know that we have some pretty big races on the horizon that I'm looking forward to. What outside of the races are you looking forward to? I guess more from like a brand, a marketing aspect are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, first, like to touch on the races, I'm like, like a lot of people excited to see who comes out on top, who wins, what the surprises are, what the stories are, what, really good close races we have. But I'm also thinking about how brands take advantage of those sort of like cultural moments and like current like zeitgeist happenings, how the races themselves interact with the sport and how the sport's growing and changing, how the products evolve to that growing and changing like definition of a runner. I'm looking kind of industry wide at that sort of storytelling and how that connects with all the things that we see happen culturally and throughout the sport throughout the year. So that's the stuff I'm watching out for, just as much as not just what happens, I guess, but like what sort of the reaction from the industry is to it. That's really interesting to me.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed over the last, I'll say 18 months, because that's when I kind of started paying attention to it more, is it seems that more people, including yourself, have taken their platform and started a new brand. So last episode, perfect example, Grayson Murphy starts her paper company. Yeah. You have Heather Jackson starts the Dirt Brigade. There's a gentleman in West Virginia, Ryan Ramsby, who started Roman Run.
Right.
Do you think we're going to see a lot more of that, where athletes take their paycheck more into their own hands now and build brands off of what it is that they've created? Are we going to see more of that?
Yeah, I really hope so. I think for a couple of reasons. First, like the barriers to entry to doing that are a lot lower than they used to be. If you want to have product made, that's a lot. The internet has just really democratized a lot of that. So making it happen is still really difficult, but a bit easier, like just logistically than it used to be. But also from the athlete standpoint, just diversifying your income, diversifying your sort of story within the sport and not having it so attached or so dependent on, one brand telling it for you, I think is really extending the longevity of their careers and making them more valuable, making athletes more marketable. So from an athlete standpoint, I think that's absolutely a way to go. I don't know that I personally come at it from like the athlete standpoint. I think of myself more as a creative, as a photographer, as a director, as a filmmaker. Telling a story is something that just really interests me. Looking for a story, finding a story. So doing that with a brand as opposed to a film for me is kind of the next challenge. It's how do I tell a story with products, with events, with of course photos and video and other activations. How do I do that sort of the way I would within a film if there was like music or some sound effects that I would incorporate or some voiceover or some like visual effects and using those as sort of the tools to tell the story in that way. Yeah, I hope we see a lot more of that coming. I think it's starting to trend that way, but I wouldn't say particularly heavily in running, at least the way we've seen it maybe in larger mainstream like ball sports and things.
Hey folks, if you're loving the stories, tips, and laughs we're dishing out, make sure you don't miss an episode. Hit that subscribe button so you're the first to know when a new episode drops. And hey, if you've got a second, why not leave us a review? Your feedback helps us improve and keeps this running community growing. Lace up, hit subscribe, and let's get back into the show.
Yeah, the reason I wanted to ask that first is because I see a lot of opportunity, just as me with my own brand, of where I'll hear people say, hey, so-and-so athlete should be sponsored. And it's like, well, so-and-so athlete I can see so much potential in this guy, this woman. They should be doing this and this. And I hope that they understand that of even what a simple YouTube channel can do to your marketability to the bigger sponsors.
That's right.
And do you work with athletes to help them see that? Because they're runners, that's their job, is to run, but they want to make money, so they need to sell a product. And do you work with any athletes to help them see that?
I haven't too much specifically. I did a call with my friend Kelly Newland, who is I guess, agent athlete manager in particularly trail running specifically. And Kelly and I did a call and put a little, I don't know, seminar type thing together for the PTRA, which is the Professional Trail Runners Association, talking about, some of those things. I mean, from Kelly's standpoint, it was how an athlete should kind of position themselves and market themselves when they're looking for brand sponsorship, approaching that relationship and that sponsorship discussion. For me, it's a lot of looking at that, again, from that storytelling perspective. But I think it depends on the athlete. I mean, some of them are more natural storytellers, are a lot more comfortable with storytelling, are a lot more comfortable with, say, starting a YouTube channel. Others really they just want to train. They just want to run. You start to see the athletes that are a little bit more leaning towards, and a little more comfortable with that storytelling do that. But the question was, how did the others that really just want to train and run, how can their sponsors, even the brands that they work with, enable them more to be better or more diversified, I guess, marketing outlets for them? How can they help them to start the YouTube channel? How can they help them to be more comfortable and active on social? Provide them the resources, provide them the training, things like that, so that they can, just focus on running if that's sort of their personality.
Yeah, I mean, the sport has grown so much in the past
So
5, 10
much.
years. I mean, I'm half kidding, but how far away do you think we are from Jim Walmsley tequila? Like in boxing, really getting sponsored by these companies outside of running.
I hope we're not far away. I think it sort of seems different to those of us that remember it, the sport from 10 or 15 years ago, but it wouldn't shock me to see something like that right now. You start to see it maybe a little bit with like Courtney. She has some sponsorships with like Kodiak cakes, right? That makes like pancake mix, things that are like starting to be a little bit disconnected from the sport. Granted, not like big brands or anything like that, but as running starts to permeate, and we're seeing a lot of that right now, probably a bit more with road than with trail, but starts to permeate into the larger culture, into like hip hop culture and things like that. I don't think that talking about partnerships with more mainstream brands is such a stretch, and I think it would be really, really cool to see.
Yeah, I don't think it's too far off because Courtney, Jim Killian, and Kate. I count Katie in that group of.
I agree.
The very top echelon of super marketable. We're not that far off from a Katie Scheid vodka or whatever. Her own beer brand maybe. I'm just throwing products out there. Could be anything. But I don't think we're that far off of it because there's starting to be enough eyeballs on the sport. And that kind of brings me to the next question. And I know we have a pushback of trail running where we don't want it to be mainstream. We have this like hardcore group of, and I get that. We have the Laurel Highlands Ultra that stays old school. We still have plenty of old school races. But how do we balance and move the sport forward and get it more into the mainstream? Do you have any ideas behind that?
I would love to see the sport become more mainstream because I think the value that it provides so many people within the sport, I would just love to see that extended to more and more people. And that's sort of a lot of my motivation to see it go more, quote unquote mainstream. You start to see as the sport grows, different subcultures sort of emerge, right? Like it's a lot more faster at the front of the sport now. There's a lot more speed, almost like a road marathon sort of mentality that didn't exist like 10 or 15 years ago in trail and ultra running. So that's sort of like a subculture that has kind of emerged, somewhat new, that as the sport grows, I think as you see it go more mainstream, you're just going to see more of that. I think you're just going to see the tried and true, like maybe mom and pop races, if you want to call them that, where the start line is just someone yelling go. I love those races. You're always going to have that sort of subculture within the sport. So I don't know that anybody that feels sort of threatened by any mainstream growth, I don't know. I don't see that as being super justified, because I think, like I said, you're going to always have that sort of subculture to it. How does it reach that? It's starting to connect outside of the sport to people that come into the sport from other areas, maybe that have more of a following in larger mainstream culture, that kind of start to spread the story of the sport outside of our little bubble. That can be brands coming in. That can be, like you see within road running now, like, Jelly Roll just starts talking about running 5Ks and losing weight, and now he's starting to run crew and all this, and it's kind of on the road side. The whole Travis Barker angle, I think you start to see more stories like that, and that really helps it kind of jump outside of our bubble. And road running, of course, being just a larger side of the sport, is seeing that, I think, a bit for trail. But I don't know that trail's too far off from that, because when people discover they can run a marathon, as we know in the ultra world, you start thinking about, going a little farther and what if, that what if question. So I would expect trail and ultra to follow not too far behind.
I agree. And we do have in our, what you said, bubble, it's the perfect, I think we're going to see the perfect storm. We have a demographic that brands highly seek. We are the prime demographic for a lot of nicer brands. I always say we're a little bit closer to like a country club than we are, not a country club, I guess. I don't know what else the alternative would be, but that's kind of where I position the same demographic.
I mean, is it a little bit like a dirtbag country club? Is that what we could call?
Yeah, dirtbag country club, I think.
But you're right.
I love that.
Yeah, right. You do see some of the stats around the sport, and that there's a really large, like, affluent angle to runners in the sport. I mean, on the downside, like, it's super white, it's super male. And like, I mean, we're like some white middle-aged guys sitting around here talking about this. But I mean, from my perspective, like I like to see it grow, and I want more people and more perspectives within the sport, because that's really interesting to me. So I think that's an area I'd really like to see the sport sort of mature and evolve, to bring in more people from, different cultures around our country and around the world. Because boy, what an interesting, even more diverse scene would that be. That sounds like a ton of fun.
So Casey, I think the only downside for us as the sport continues to expand is our chances of hitting in the top 10 go down dramatically.
Oh yeah.
Not that was going to happen anyways, but
yeah, I got to be real picky at some small local races if I want to see the top 10. Real picky.
You can win your beer mile.
It's more just getting into them at all. It's in some cases, isn't it?
Yeah, it's tough, but and the reason I brought up the demographics is, I guess the first time was the first time I ran a 50K, I saw it, but when I was at Grindstone, it's held at a campground.
Yeah,
I'm there camping, like actually, we've got a tent on the ground, we're camping, and we might have been the only ones that were on the ground. Like I'm watching $120,000 rigs pull in, and
yeah,
I was like, holy shit! Like I need a runner did tell me, because I have a sauce company with mustards, and I was talking to him about the demographics. He's like, sounds like you need a more expensive mustard then, huh?
well, let's be fair. Let's be fair and honest. So last year when we went back, you did sleep in your Tesla.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, to be fair, I did sleep in a very climate controlled, very nice,
warm, right.
Yeah, not to be excluded from that, but yeah, that is true. I am part of the demographic, so I get it. Well, that was insightful, Matt. I appreciate it, and it's always good to get insights of a sport that you're a part of, and especially from something that I wish I always want to be better at something, branding and stuff.
The sport, I guess adding on that, just as other thoughts kind of come to mind, like the sport's changing really quickly though. And I know there's a lot of people and brands that are looking to bring in different perspectives and grow the diversity within the sport, like just demographically. So that's something, going to Western States, going to Hard Rock, being out in the sport this year that will really be looking for and excited to see. I mean, the female side of the sport is taken off and had a huge year last year. So how does that evolve this year? What's next for that? We can speculate, but I'm excited to just be at events like TrailCon out in Tahoe prior to Western States and just kind of see how that becomes part of the discourse more. So if we're talking about things I'm looking forward to seeing this year, it's watching that too.
Yeah, I know I've mentioned it here before. Jim and Killian in Western States, I've seen them race before. I want to see Courtney versus Katie now.
That would be fun.
That's the matchup I really want to see is Courtney versus Katie. Like,
where would you want to see them? Which course ideally?
I think Western States would probably be, they're both, I don't know. I don't know that it matters. They could run down, the Canal Corridor 100 and I'd show up.
That's true.
If I got to pick, Western States would definitely would be it. Maybe UTMB. I don't know. It's either one. Any race they do. Burning River 100.
I agree. Any of them would be really interesting. But that sort of rivalry is kind of fun for the sport, isn't it? When people can kind of see. I mean, we're shaping up to have that on the men's side at Western States too this year, aren't we?
It certainly looks that way. And
yeah,
rivalries are truly what makes sports.
Yeah, I agree.
Another thing that I would like to see when we're talking about marketing and I would like to see Camille embrace a heel roll and come back at Western States. That's what I want to see. Like,
that would be great too.
Controversy sells, heat sells.
Yes.
I would root for her to do that. Probably not a popular opinion right now, but I don't care. I would like to see it. She's a phenomenally talented runner. There's heat around her. And I think that would be another cool story. And that would get people to watch, I think.
I wonder as the sport grows, do we get more of the sort of like villain story or villain angle more than we do? Are we still kind of so small that we don't really have that because it's just kind of like self-policing, right? But as it gets bigger and like I said, you start to have more subcultures. Do we kind of get more like, that villain that maybe people are rooting for from some angle? Like, I think that would be fun. It's part of the evolution, the growth, isn't it?
It's part of sports, every sport.
It is. That's right.
The whole country's rooting against Patrick Mahomes, not because they don't personally like him, but just because he's won before. And,
yes,
like I said, heat sells. There's a reason the WWF was so successful for decades.
That's right. Manufactured heat.
Manufactured heat.
And then WWE.
Yeah. Hate to bring wrestling into it, but that is the home of villains.
There isn't really too much sort of like, the way Mahomes, like people are rooting against Mahomes, right? Because he's won like a couple times and whatnot. But like, you don't really see that as much in trail running. Like nobody wants Killian to lose because he's won too much. Like, I don't think there's anyone that feels that way.
Yeah, it's a very nice sport. It is. Like, it's very polite. It's very nice. Everyone cheers for everyone, it's good to see. Hey, sportsmanship is, don't take a person while they're down for sure. But a little edge, I don't think would hurt the sport.
A little bit of shit talk, maybe. We're lacking that right now to have what we're talking about in the future. You need a little bit of that back and forth. So-and-so said this, so-and-so said that, for the rivalry to build.
I agree. It makes me think of like a podcast episode recently. Have you guys listened to the Boulder Boys here out of Boulder?
I've heard of it. I haven't yet listened to it. There's a handful of pro trail runners and they banter on their podcast weekly or every couple weeks. And they had Finn Melanson from Single Track on there. And Finn did a great job because he kind of like corralled and directed like the bantering into like to really go deeper down a hole before switching subjects basically. And they talked about that, like is a little bit more like because it exists between some runners. They don't like this person or that person, because of this thing that happens, but it's very buried and not really talked about so openly. But I think it would be great to hear more of that more openly and be able to watch a race,
knowing, who's got their eyes on each other.
Like I 100% agree. I wish it were more, because drama is what sells shows. That's what people click on.
Yeah. And I think if you look at the growth of like live stream within the sport, having those narratives would really help grow the live stream side of the sport too. And I think that's a real, possible growth engine in the future. And that's the kind of stuff that they need to generate an audience and retain an audience, right?
I guess a good comparison, now that I think about it, maybe it is, I don't know, probably not, but the poker boom of the like mid 2000s, there was some very unlikable people.
I remember that.
And it was like watching Phil Hellmuth blow up was why people tuned in, seeing who he would shit talk with that, that episode or that tournament or whatever. That was a big thing. So we might be onto something, Matt. I think we are.
And those guys also, I remember that, like sitting around the table, they each were in and of themselves like a caricature of some stereotypical type of person, right? And so it was almost like you literally had characters in the story of that, particular game.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of room for that in trail running.
Yeah, I love it.
That where you just have these just characters that are so different in contrast, and hopefully you have some friction. I don't know. But I'm still trying to like walk on eggshells to say this, because people, I don't want it to be construed as negative, because that's not what I'm looking at it strictly from a marketing brand perspective.
100%. Yeah.
I want to see Dylan Bowman in the locker room, beforehand interviewing, whoever, and the person like, oh, my goal today is to beat so-and-so because my local legend off of whatever.
I think they'll keep it lighthearted. I mean, this isn't, MMA, right?
No.
I mean, these are runners. They're nice people. So I think even if we start talking a little smack, it's still going to be lighthearted.
Yeah.
We're not talking about their mamas or anything like that.
No. Keeping it within the context of the sport is very important here.
Yeah.
Do you guys think within the sport of running, talking about having caricatures, like within poker, the poker example, does trail running lend to that even more than like road running or even track? Is that like maybe something the trail side of the sport should just lean harder into?
I think so.
Could be.
Road runners always come across as kind of like, and my buddy Will's going to laugh at this, like, stiff and not friendly and not outgoing. They're just very narrow, that's not saying that they are. I'm not accusing them of that. That's just kind of where trail running has this. We have some characters in trail running. Like you see some
real characters,
back of the pack, middle of the pack, front. You see some, and we were at Western States last year crewing, and some of the stuff I saw, I was like, this is like a marketing dream to have this, this kind of thing happen, and no one's taking advantage of it. So yeah, I think
Casey, to quote you, road running is the orchestra, right? Trail running is a fish concert.
Yeah, I did say that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. What's track then? Because I feel like track's the one I would compare the most to trail running, just based on my perception as having the most characters in it.
Yeah. Oh, and who's our 100 meter guy?
No Lyles.
Yeah. Came out and crushed it. He's a very outlandish, he embraces that character, and I don't know him. I don't know his personal, if that's how he always is, or if he turns it on when the camera's on, because that's exciting. I remember sitting here in my living room watching that, didn't really know him, but he came out and did his thing. And I was like, I'm rooting for this guy. That's my guy. No, that's him.
It's entertainment as much as sports when you bring that side of yourself into it, isn't it? And like going back to our conversations on, athletes and having YouTube channels, like that, it all connects. From that perspective.
Maybe, hopefully, we'll see, people embrace that character or take on like a running persona, I guess. And I hate to make another WWF comparison, but
yeah, right.
but it's true. Like the characters that you remember it was a fake sport, but I still can, if I hear the Ultimate Warrior's music play.
Oh yeah.
I know exactly what it means. We need something in trail running, I feel, to connect. Like, we're missing something, I think, Matt. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, there's like a little bit more branding, maybe, right, of the athletes and whatnot. But on the other side too, like I think of a lot of trail runners, and I mean, a lot of people like spending hours at a time alone out in the wilderness for a reason. Like maybe it's also more of an introverted crowd, so it maybe doesn't lend as much to all, the showmanship that we're talking about. But it's growing a lot. There might be some more of that as people come into the sport for other reasons that they draw from it, aside from just alone time on the trail.
Yeah, and I do value my alone time out in the trail by myself. I mean, Rob, I know you're the same. It's good to get out there and in CVNP here and be alone for 2 hours and just run through the woods. So there is that aspect of the sport that
I agree.
that I embrace, and some of it's said in all good fun and joking, but also I kind of serious about some of the character stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, just from like we're talking about how to connect right to mainstream culture. Like I think that's where this angle comes from, right? It's having these characters and the larger than life personality. It helps make the sport a little bit more open to that connection.
Hopefully it does that. I mean, and hopefully we get to see it evolve, and maybe Jim comes out to Western States like a Real Big Fish song or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. But you saw, I mean, early Jim was really like throwing his goals out there and swinging big, and that in hindsight, you talk to some of the younger runners now, that brought a lot of people into the sport. Him like just like being real brash about him run 14 hours at Western States, and that brought a lot of runners in that otherwise might not connected with, like crunchy granola trail runners.
It's true. We do need the Mike Tyson of trail running, right? Or even if you're not a runner, you know who he is, right?
All these characters draw people in.
Yeah, and yeah, Jim, he was edgier then than really there is edgy now.
I agree. He was, yeah.
And I think maybe giving him credit for really growing the sport, because it caught some mainstream people talking about, especially in the running world. I don't know the name, and I'm not going to plug it because it's a super toxic place. But there's that message board. If you search his name, it was like all this shit talking on him, how he can't do this, he can't qualify for the Olympics, and
Oh yeah.
well, that's bad, but it has people talking about him. So his kind of calling his shots of, I'm going to go qualify for the Olympics. That's my goal. That gets people talking and kind of turns heads. So yeah, shout out to Jim for that. And I would say he's definitely part of the boom of why he's one of the big factors of why it happened, and Courtney as well.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. On the women's side, right? I totally agree.
I would say Courtney, even just all around, not even just the women's side, going on Joe Rogan, predominantly male demographic, and how many maybe road runners that, maybe weren't familiar with the sport, saw what she was doing, and, let me give my local 50K, a shot or something. So
I think it was really cool for like the larger public that follows Joe Rogan, that follows Cam Hanes and this like hunting like crowd, right? This hunting angle into the sport, to see Courtney, particularly at that Moab 240 where she beat everyone, to go on Rogan, talk about that. Cameron Hanes raced in that race as well. And that, I think that was a really cool moment for the sport and for women, I guess, in particular, to be on top of that conversation.
Those two have contributed. I don't put a number on it, but a majority of this wave of the sport, I think.
And she's kind of part of the extended Rogan crew at this point, just because she hangs out with Haynes so much, and there's quite a bit of content online, her and Cameron running together. And, once you're on the Joe Rogan Experience, you kind of get put into that extended family. So I'm guessing we'll see her back on at some point.
Yeah. Another sort of connection, right, into some other like more mainstream, like larger culture that kind of got brought in or exposed to trail running through that. And I think all those little connections have helped the sport grow a lot over the years.
I'm guessing all of this is what helped you start your own brand. Did that play a part in, you saw this wave coming and you were like, your marketing creative brain?
Not really. No, not really. No, not really. It wasn't. For me, it was working with so many brands over 10, 12 years, shooting campaigns, launching products, making films, working at events, being exposed to so much of the sport from a storytelling perspective. Like I was kind of mentioning before, the challenge for me to make a film and relay a story and use the color and the audio and the visual effects and those sorts of things to tell a story, I just got more interested on kind of a step up from that. Why are the clients that I was working for, why are the brands launching this shoe and having this message, and what audience are they trying to speak to, and how are they communicating that message? That sort of storytelling on that level became really interesting to me. How could we make an event that connected better than maybe some of the events or the standard events we see, or the activations we see at races? How can brands connect better that way? How can the photography stand out more and be a bit more distinct? You see trends where all brands kind of always look this way, and then a lot of brands always use photography that kind of looks that way. Like how to be distinct in storytelling on that brand level really piqued my curiosity. Working with so many digital teams, working with so many creative directors, working with so many agencies that were trying to do these things, I just really felt like I gained a lot of knowledge, and it made me really curious. I'm always taking big swings. I mean, I had no background in photo or video when I started to do this. Like I worked in biotech and like marketing and sales at two biotech startups. But I've just always been like I guess confident that I can figure things out and learn things. But then I don't know, I guess either naive or bold to leap and try them myself. So that sort of like bug in my ear was a lot of the reason that I just wanted to start my own brand. And it's doing that isn't something that is profitable a year later. I mean, the brands you start to see coming up now, like Satisfy and Bandit, some of these brands, Satisfy in particular, they've been around for 10 years, and only the last couple of years are people really taking notice on a larger scale. So it was also like I just want to get this started, and that flywheel will take a while to kind of gain momentum as I fine tune the storytelling, develop products, and learn a lot of things I need to learn. So that, I don't know if urgency is the right word, but need to just kind of start to get that snowball rolling sooner than later was part of the motivation too.
Your photos are amazing. I mean,
thank
the photos
you.
from Take the Bridge, that race.
That's a cool one. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fun. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So was that race 100% at night, or did they start at sunset?
I mean, that was at winter. So during the winter, of course, it gets dark a little bit earlier. I forget what time that race started at. Maybe 8 o'clock, something like that.
We're well aware of that here in Ohio. Matt.
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh yeah. But Take the Bridge is a really cool race. My friend Darcy puts that on. They partner with brands periodically. A real kind of underground, like gritty racing scene. I don't know how familiar you guys are with them. How you got to make your way around the town. There's checkpoints, but you can go any way you want to get there. So like just kind of a cool, different format. That was a fun one to shoot. The one I shot was, here in Denver, so a bit more local, but it lends itself to that black and white, gritty, at night kind of, darker image sort of look. And when people are gassed and out of breath at the end of the race, or of any race, that always makes for the best shots.
Yeah, it's a good way to describe it. Gritty. When you look at the photos, that's the first word that pops in your mind.
That's the feel. Gritty. I mean, they're usually grainy too, because everyone has their ISO cranked up on their cameras, so you get that kind of just digital grain as a result. But it kind of lends to the mood a bit, and I think you see a lot of Take the Bridge photos that are kind of similar in some regards, because of that. Just kind of naturally falls that way. Thanks for the nod on the photos. I appreciate that, guys. I haven't taken as many lately as I used to. Fun to talk about.
Yeah, I wish you would take more, because it's a great storytelling medium. The photos, I think. I sometimes
I love it.
Like if I run, we talk about a lot on the show, Laurel Highlands, very old school race, but they have a photographer, and I'll just scroll through all the pictures because it's beautiful scenery, and it's just, you can see different runners progress through the race as and it's, you get this story in these still frames, and it's okay, 50K, this guy looked real good at the, smiling happy at mile 8, but now it's, mile 30, and this dude is bloody and beaten, and you get to see the story progress through photography in a way that I don't think video quite captures.
When you shoot a race, for me, I was always watching for those things, and you really, it makes you be really focused and really in tune with the race and everything that's happening around you when you have your camera in your hand and you're kind of, looking for what, sets that kind of spark in your brain to take the photo. And that, having to pay that close of attention and be that tuned in I just really enjoy that state of mind. It's kind of evolved now, where we're talking about, the industry and what are you looking for? That's kind of the same approach that I have. Like, I want to go to events this summer and see how the sport evolves with that sort of a focus, like I would have, shooting a race, watching the runners go by, seeing who looks like they're hurting, where's the moment to, like, anticipating maybe the moment to, snap that photo. That state of mind is I don't know, maybe it's a flow state in a way, like running. But it's really, really fun.
It certainly is. I think in artists, they call it right brain mode, correct? Is that what artists? Yeah, I think there's definitely some flow state, right brain type, remembering things and just angles. And I don't understand it because I don't take pictures. But
yeah,
Rob's our photographer, huh, Rob?
I'm not even going to call myself that with Matt on the podcast.
Yes, you are, Rob. Yes, everybody is. Everybody has a different view. Yes, you are.
I mean, you've done so much. We do a little bit of research before every podcast. I didn't know what to talk about. I mean, there's documentaries, tons of photos. I mean, a million different articles. What was your favorite project? I mean, I know you worked with Cliff Bar. I mean, you name it.
Yeah, it's so hard. I don't know what I don't know. I don't really know what. So, like, the films I did with Jim were really, really fun. When he was, first at Western States and trying to swing for 14 hours, and just embedding with him and all his, buddies that all went by the Coconino Cowboys at the time, in 2016, 2017, 2018. It was really cool to sort of be a casual observer that's like right in it. Like, we all stay at the same house, like when we went out to Western States. And so being right in those moments with the camera, that was a lot of fun. I mean, I followed Tony Krupicka on, Nolan's 14 attempts, and, like, gone up, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 of the 14ers, trying to get, some photos and shoot some video of him doing that. Joe Grant also on Nolan's 14 attempts. That those kind of come to mind because they're sort of adventures for me too, with the camera, huffing up and down peaks and trying to gauge, like a race, right? Trying to gauge the time and what time you need to be here or be there, and watching as the story unfolds, not knowing what's going to happen. Those are probably some of the most fun things. I've also had, like, a lot of fun on commercial shoots too, where it's kind of a real scripted, like, shoe launch that isn't, quite as creative or in depth, like, from a storytelling perspective as some of those adventures were. But just, like, the crew and the people that I've been able to work with, from, like, the talent or, like, models on those shoots to creative directors to, DPs and, like, camera ops that I've worked with. I mean, like, hair and makeup and wardrobe people, some of those crews have been a lot of fun too on the commercial side. So I have really, really, really good memories of that. Man, I the first time I made a film, I ran 150 miles of the Colorado Trail with Scott Jaime in a week when he set the fastest time on the Colorado Trail, which is roughly 500 miles. I didn't do the whole thing by any means, but doing that much of that trail in a week while carrying cameras was an adventure and really wrecked me. That was kind of the first longer form film that I made. And I got to see the entire Colorado Trail, which is awesome and which was amazing. Yeah, there's a few that stand out. There's probably others that'll come to mind. I don't have this, like, catalog memory of everything I've done, like maybe I feel some people do. It all kind of pops up at different moments if I'm kind of cued or reminded of things, but it's hard for me to just, like, from scratch be like, yeah, here's, like, the top 3 things or something. Like, I'm totally forgetting some things that were incredible and definitely not forgettable.
We've worked on a lot of projects. I'm not surprised. You're going to forget at least a couple.
I honestly, it's just been fun. Like, the most fun stuff is getting to know the people that I'm working with, like mentioning some of the commercial crews, but the athletes too, like, like I said, spending time with Jim and the Coconino Cowboys and those early days. And it's part of making a good film too, is kind of embedding with them so they kind of trust you and you're part of the group and you're not like the guy that's always got a camera pointed in their face that they don't really know. I mean, that really puts you in a position to tell a better story also. And yeah, maybe it's a lesson for brands too, as they try to tell more brand stories that they want to be more authentic versus more contrived. If you're not really comfortable with, or the subject isn't really comfortable for you, it comes off as more contrived.
What you said, most people are hip to if it's made up and contrived and not organic, people can, you can spot it a mile away. And some companies haven't yet figured that out, I don't think.
Yeah, the ones that have figured it out are the ones that really live and breathe in the sport themselves.
Yeah.
The ones that have trouble with it just see the sport as the industry where their company tries to sell product instead of this subculture of people where they feel like they also are identified too, right? That's the difference right there. And that's why small brands really succeed, because they start these brands with that passion and they live it. And then the bigger they get, when they're, part of VF or become these, big conglomerates, they have a harder time connecting.
Yeah. And you can hire all the influencers you want, but it's still, we can generally spot it,
I think so too.
Trying not to mention any brands in particular, but yeah, it's very, yeah, if it's not organic, it's pretty easy to see behind the curtain.
And it's sort of like, for me, comes to the conversation that we have like within like the business side of the sport, or any business, I suppose. It's like, data driven decision making versus like, more creative or maybe intuitive decision making. If you're solely relying on data, I think your chances of coming across as inauthentic are a lot higher, because you can't just hit, these 3 data points in a vacuum and make a campaign that speaks to that data driven trend and have it connect with actual people, living in this audience that you're speaking to. You've got to, I suppose you got to balance that and also be really connected with the audience. So, like we were saying, things land as a bit more authentic and not so contrived.
I'll bring it up because it's positive, but Bill Armstrong of Never Second, I think, has done a very good job of understanding the sport and embracing the culture of running, not just looking at it as, dollars and data points, but to build a brand around running, because he does more than just trail running. It's not just trail running. He does marathons and sponsors it and actually puts his brand, gives money to some of these organizations to, put on a little bit better event.
That's right.
One of them is Pittsburgh Marathon, my hometown marathon. So, awesome to see that get more support and more backing from.
Yeah, that's great to see, Never Second really contributing in Pittsburgh, right? And not just like New York and LA or something, right? Like they really kind of focus on maybe not the most obvious trail running markets or not the most obvious running markets. I think that's really cool for them to have some focus there.
Yeah, it is. And I think that does exactly what you said. It lends to the authenticity of a brand because you're putting dollars behind what it is you're saying, not just saying things for the good of saying them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I thought I'd just put a focus on them because I do think they do an exceptional job. And we try and be positive here at the Hobby Jogger, right, Rob?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. We sure do.
It's not all shit talk and heel heat here.
It's usually the opposite of that.
Yeah, it's usually the opposite. Well, Matt, it's been awesome talking to you, man. We could do a 3-hour long form on branding and ideas of marketing and such. So,
and just the sport in general. I feel like I could talk all day.
Yeah, I could as well.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thank you so much. And where can our listeners find you? Sorry, Rob. Rob, you say it.
No, you already said it. Go ahead.
My fault. I jumped the gun.
Come on, Rob. I want to hear.
So, Matt, where can our listeners find you?
You can find me several places. On Instagram, my handle is Trappe Photo, TRAPPEPHOTO. I write a newsletter on Substack called A Matter of Brand. And the brand that I'm working on is called Auteur Sportif. So that's auteursportif.com. I guess I didn't really go into the brand too much, but it's coming at running from a lifestyle angle, talking about running as an art, more than sports and more than performance, and having maybe speaking to that sort of mentality, that sort of lens on the sport. So yeah, check out auteursportif.com, and thank you for having me. Reach out anytime.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Hobby Jogger. We hope you've enjoyed our conversation today. And if you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support keeps us moving forward. Until next time, keep those feet moving and enjoy the miles.